This is an incredibly important Supreme Court case, and if you care about the fundamental right in this country to keep and bear arms, you need to watch this video. It tells you everything you need to know about what the government wants to do and the future of government overreach. In an emergency 7-2 decision, the Supreme Court upheld the ATF's frame and receiver rule, which is clearly unconstitutional and absolutely insane. I need you to stick with me because in just a second, we're going to talk about the case, who ruled against it, and why this is so important. But if you are new here though, please do subscribe down below. I really appreciate it. Anyway, I appreciate the support so far, and let's get into it. The ATF frame or receiver rule was a 2022 ATF regulation that completely redefined the definition of a firearm, redefined the definition of what they were allowed to regulate. Previously, a firearm, which is what the ATF's allowed to regulate, was a fully functioning gun where you can squeeze a trigger and a bullet can come out. The rule changed to mean anything that can be readily converted into a firearm is now legally defined as a firearm. This is insane. I cannot stress how significant this is. Thomas and Alito ruled against this, and that kind of tells you everything you need to know. Essentially, this new rule, this regulation, forces weapons parts kits manufacturers to serialize and basically make their products traceable by the federal government. This is insane. Okay, first of all, let's just talk about it logically. If I have a piece of metal that cannot fire a gun, it is not a firearm. And you saying it is legally a firearm doesn't make it any more a firearm. It just isn't one. On a purely factual basis, weapons parts kits are not firearms. They are weapons parts kits. They are things that allow you to make your own firearm. That, by the way, is clearly in line with the history and tradition of the Second Amendment. For all of American history, and even before that, of course, Americans of all stripes and colors have been making their own guns, and the government has no say in that. And currently, by the way, if you make your own firearm from scratch, you do not have to put a serial number on it, and the government really can't tell you what to do. Now, certainly there's a lot of legal theory and argument that went into this. I think they got the wrong answer, and there are a lot of Second Amendment channels that will focus on that. But what I'm gonna focus on, just for this video, is why they tried to do this. Why is the government so desperate to not let you make your own DIY firearms? And I think the reason is very clear. If you purchase a firearm from an FFL, of course they're not allowed to make a gun registry, but they still do have a transaction there, and they are able to see who bought one gun and trace these through, let's say, a driver's license to a specific address, and if they wanted to, they could confiscate them. This effectively criminalizes the process of making your own gun, effectively cutting the government in to every single firearm transaction and letting the government know basically where every single firearm is. Now, obviously there are exceptions to this. Let's say I could buy a gun and then throw it up in the air, and whoever gets it keeps it, right? Like something like that. Obviously the government's not gonna be able to know who it is, but they are in almost every situation gonna be able to either find the firearm or trace who has the firearm. And that is incredibly dangerous. Remember, the whole point of the Second Amendment, right? Going back to the text of the Second Amendment is a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And so this begs the question, who is the militia? Well, the militia, of course, is any, as defined in US law, any able-bodied male between the ages of 18 and 45. Now, the key point behind all this is the militia is, of course, able to defend, the U.S. from insurrection, able to defend the U.S. from foreign invasion, everything like that. And of course, the Second Amendment does protect your right, let's say, to have a gun and shoot someone who's coming to murder you. No question about that. But the core tenet underlying the entire Second Amendment, and the real key reason, is for us to protect ourselves against government tyranny. And this law criminalizes that. And this is why they are so desperate to effectively create gun registries. Now, of course, a gun registry is something kind of separate where every gun is traced in terms of where it actually is at a specific time, and this isn't exactly that. But this is the closest thing they can legally do, and that's why they're so desperate to do this. Remember, gun registries are currently illegal in the United States, so there's not really an easy way for them to establish this sort of system. But FFLs do keep records, and FFLs legally must keep records of whose firearm goes where, and ghost guns, by the way, make like less than 1% of all firearms crime. They're extremely rare. This is not like an issue where, half the country is all of a sudden shooting each other with these ghost guns, right? That's a propaganda term. It's kind of supposed to be spooky, but you know what I mean? Shooting each other with these ghost guns. But they're acting like it's this major deal. And of course the point is to create a quasi-gun registry. I'm not stupid, you're not stupid, we know that's what they're doing. This absolutely undercuts the entire history of American tradition, which allowed me or you to make our own guns for personal use. But it also does something arguably more dangerous. It allows the administrative agencies to, all of a sudden, without any congressional approval, without us voting, without us even knowing who these people are, it allows them to just change the law. They literally said, this is not a firearm. Okay, now it is. And now there's a whole new set of regulation. That cannot be allowed. That cannot be allowed. They literally have encroached on our Second Amendment rights without being elected, without even being appointed, and to a large degree, without us even knowing who they are. Now, of course, the head of the ATF is appointed by the president, who is elected, but all the other bureaucrats in that entire system are not plum book appointees, right? The plum book is the list of presidential appointments, right? So a lot of these people, we don't know who they are. We've never elected them. We've never voted for the people that elected them. We don't know what these people are. And they're able to come in and destroy our constitutional democracy, destroy some of our core constitutional rights with no oversight and with no protection. This is absolutely a slippery slope. Readily converted is such a nebulous term. I mean, if I have a piece of metal and I'm a very good machinist, I can readily convert that into a firearm. If I own a factory, I can readily convert that into a firearm. You're telling me I gotta have a serial number on that? It's insane. It's insane. If you look at the way Shinzo Abe was assassinated, it was just a DIY gun. Some guy put some pieces together and now he had a gun. And so this really lets them regulate almost anything. This has an almost unlimited scope, right? They can basically do now whatever they want. This is a disaster in my point of view, and it's really bad. And one of the ways you know it's so bad, one of the ways you know this is terrible for the Second Amendment, and that this is obviously terrible for the Second Amendment, is you rarely get the 7-2 decision. If it's just Thomas and Alito dissenting, you know there's a problem there. You remember, a lot of the justices on the U.S. Supreme Court that are conservative, that are pro-2A, are predominantly anti-criminal, right? So they'll support almost any government intervention that they believe in some way prevents some sort of criminality. Now, Thomas and Alito are, of course, constitutionalists in there, and they're very principled people, and I'm not going to take away from that. But when you have a 7-2 decision and you have all the liberal justices and some of the conservative justices signing together, you know there's a problem. There's a problem with that, especially in Second Amendment litigation, right? Because obviously the anti-gun justices want to take away all of our guns. They'd be perfectly happy for a total firearms ban essentially to come through. So this is an unbelievably bad precedent. This is extremely worrying, and this is unbelievably bad. They have entirely allowed the ATF, with no oversight, with no laws being passed, with no one being elected, to just all of a sudden change the law. All of a sudden do whatever they want with our fundamental constitutional rights. And if the Second Amendment is actually a fundamental constitutional right, which I think it is, it predates the Constitution, right? It's not given us to us by the Constitution, it's given us by God, actually. But if you want to say that the Second Amendment is a fundamental constitutional right, which it obviously is, this cannot be allowed. This is an unbelievably dangerous case, and I really, really hope you kind of grasp the reality of that and grasp the severity of this. Now, again, not to say the Supreme Court justices always do everything wrong. They don't. Sometimes they have great decisions, great pro-2A decisions. But something like this basically cannot be allowed. Something like this is extremely dangerous, and honestly, I'm really disappointed. I have a lot more to say on the topic. If you want to hear more, please do subscribe down below. I really appreciate the support. This is a very new channel, and I really appreciate it. We talk about Second Amendment stuff here, and if you are a principled Second Amendment person, this is the channel for you. But yeah, hope you did enjoy. If you did, please do subscribe down below. If you've got any tips, by the way, or anything you'd like me to improve on, please put that down below as well. I really, really, really appreciate it. Leave a like, comment, everything like that. I'll respond to all of them. Yeah, so I appreciate you so much, and I hope to see you in the next one.